Today we're focusing on a life, really, a life's work dedicated to solving something that seemed completely unsolvable. We're talking about Michelle Eileen McNamara.
Yes, a true crime writer, but
Yeah.
that label almost doesn't do her justice. Her pursuit wasn't just about writing a book. It was this intensely personal quest that ended up fundamentally changing a major cold case.
It's a story that goes so much further than the usual true crime genre conventions. It's about this unique combination of creative skill, real journalistic rigor, and a personal obsession that, honestly, it transformed a mystery that was decades old.
Right. Her work led to All Be Gone in the Dark, which was, a huge moment for the genre. But the real impact of that book, the true measure of it, wasn't really clear until 2 years after her death.
And that's the critical piece we really want to get into. The mission here is to move beyond just the basic summary of her life and really try to understand the path that led her to coin that now famous moniker, the Golden State Killer.
And to produce such a groundbreaking book, we have to connect the dots, really, between her own personal history, her own experiences.
And this relentless, incredibly focused investigative drive she had. We're going to look at the full scope of her writing to see exactly how she pieced it all together.
And we have to start with the most stunning fact of all, the resolution. In April of 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested as the Golden State Killer.
It's an undeniable validation of her entire effort. She didn't live to see it, but her framework, the name she gave him, her research, it was the roadmap that law enforcement finally used to get there.
It truly was.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey. We should start at the very beginning, with the foundation of this obsession, her early life in Illinois, and the events that really shaped her entire perspective on crime.
Michelle McNamara was born April 14, 1970 in Oak Park, Illinois. She was the youngest of 6 children, 4 older sisters, and an older brother.
And her family background is an interesting mix. You have this sort of traditional upbringing, but with a layer of analytical rigor baked in.
Exactly. She was raised Catholic from a proud Irish-American family. Her mother, Rita, was a stay-at-home mom, but her father, that's a key detail.
Her father, Thomas W. McNamara, was a trial lawyer. And when you think about her later work, her meticulous, almost legalistic analysis of police reports, it suggests she grew up in a world where facts had to be proven, where arguments had to be structured.
Right, where justice was a process.
Yeah.
And that's such a key point. Her approach wasn't just creative, it was procedural. You can see it even in high school.
She graduated from Oak Park and River Forest High School in 1988. And it's notable that during her senior year, she was the editor-in-chief of the student newspaper, The Trapeze.
And that's not just a title. That role requires leadership, organization, deadlines, standards. All skills she later applied directly to these sprawling, disorganized cold case files.
She then goes on to a serious academic trajectory. She got her BA in English from the University of Notre Dame in 1992, and then, critically, an MFA in creative writing from the University of Minnesota.
The MFA is so significant here. It means she formally mastered narrative techniques, voice, structure, tension, literary prose. She had the toolkit of a serious novelist.
But she chose to aim those highly refined tools at the gritty, factual world of true crime.
And that blend of literary sophistication with police procedural analysis is precisely what made her work, and especially the book, so unique and so successful.
So she has the formal training, but the drive, that almost primal need for answers that was rooted much, much earlier in her youth. The source material is very clear about this.
It says her long-standing fascination with true crime came from one single local and horrific event.
The unsolved murder of Kathleen Lombardo.
Yes. This happened when McNamara was just a teenager, and the crime scene was only 2 blocks from her childhood home.
That proximity, the idea that this ultimate violence could just erupt so close to where you're supposed to be safe, it seems to have profoundly shaped her.
It absolutely did. It instilled this urgent need to find answers, to restore some kind of order in the face of chaos, especially for victims whose cases had just stalled out.
That kind of foundational trauma explains the initial spark, but there's a second, even more personal and profound incident that connects her directly to the kinds of crimes the Golden State Killer committed.
Yes, the incident in Belfast, this was in 1992. She'd just graduated from college and moved to Northern Ireland to work.
And she's there observing the Troubles, which is, a whole societal context of unresolved violence and division.
And against that backdrop of public chaos, she experienced a private violation. On September 1st, 1992, just a month after she arrived, she was sexually assaulted by a man she worked for.
It's a devastating part of her history, but it is so crucial for understanding her professional focus.
And it's cited in her own personal writings. She directly connects that experience to her drive to investigate the Golden State Killer. The GSK's crimes were defined by home intrusion, by terrorizing women and families, by sexual violence.
So her investigation, it wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It became a personal quest to understand and bring resolution to the very kind of violation she herself had experienced.
It's like she was processing her own trauma through this rigorous investigation, trying to solve the mystery that had invaded so many other people's lives to make sense of the one that had invaded her own.
It really reframes her whole methodology. She wasn't just reporting on crime statistics. She was intimately connected to the psychological landscape of the victim.
Exactly. So when she moved to Los Angeles in 1997, her initial goal was writing for film and TV, but her personal history, it seems, it steered her toward these cold cases. Her path wasn't about crafting fiction. It was about completing the real, unfinished stories of others.
Right, she realized her skills were best used in service of truth, not make-believe.
Yes.
So she's in Los Angeles. She has the journalistic training, the literary skills, and this deeply personal motivation. How did she go from being a writer to becoming the citizen investigator that people came to know?
That transformation really begins in 2006. That's when she creates her website, True Crime Diary.
And this wasn't just another true crime blog, was it?
No, not at all. It was her specialized platform. It allowed her to develop this very distinct voice while focusing specifically on unsolved cases, the ones that, had been forgotten by the mainstream media.
Let's talk about that voice. What made her writing so unique? She was famously critical of sensationalism in true crime.
Her style was a marriage of two things. First, the almost clinical precision of a police report, the details of what happened. But then she combined that with this high-level literary analysis. She treated crime scenes like they were texts to be interpreted.
And she used that second-person address so effectively. Things like, "You are standing in this room," or "You can imagine the terror." It forces the reader out of being a passive observer.
It puts you right into the psychological space of the victim or even the perpetrator. And that's how she avoids sensationalism. It's about empathy and procedural detail, not just shock value. She was trying to reconstruct the event intellectually and emotionally so you could understand the stakes.
She gave victors back their complexity instead of reducing them to a statistic.
Exactly. And that compelling style is what built her following on True Crime Diary.
That platform also became a place for collaboration, didn't it? She developed a really important friendship with another investigative journalist, Billy Jensen.
A crucial connection, especially considering his role later on. They shared this passion for using new, often digital, methods to solve cold cases.
Which led to their panel at SXSW Interactive in 2014.
Yes, the panel was called Citizen Dix, Solving Murders with Social Media.
It's a provocative title, but it perfectly encapsulates her whole thesis, right? That the internet could be an active tool for investigation.
Absolutely. She believed in leveraging public resources, crowdsourcing information, using digital tools to crack cases that had gone dormant. She argued that dedicated amateurs, Citizen Dix, could fill the gaps that law enforcement, with all their bureaucracy, couldn't.
And this growing visibility, this philosophy, it set the stage for her to find her ultimate target, the case that would consume the rest of her life.
Right. She became intensely focused on this one unidentified serial offender who had, over the decades, collected this confusing mess of nicknames.
The East Area Rapist, or EAR, the Original Night Stalker, or ONS, the Visalia Ransacker.
The names were a huge problem. Law enforcement knew from DNA that the ER and ONS crimes were linked, but public awareness was still completely fractured. People in Sacramento knew about the ER. People in Southern California knew about the ONS. They didn't see it as one single predator.
So her genius wasn't just in the investigation, but in solving the narrative problem. She saw that all these different names were diluting the urgency.
It was essentially strategic marketing for a cold case. She understood the power of a name. And by coining one simple, comprehensive, and frankly terrifying name, the Golden State Killer, or GSK, she unified everything.
Instantly, it created this singular, memorable threat that forced everyone to see the full, decades-long scope of his devastation.
And that strategic move, that name, was launched in her breakthrough work for Los Angeles Magazine starting in 2013. That's what became the foundation for the book.
This is also where she managed to do something incredibly rare for a citizen journalist. She built a real partnership with law enforcement.
Specifically with Paul Holes, an investigator from the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office. He had dedicated years of his life to this case.
And that's fascinating. Usually, law enforcement is very wary of outside writers. How did she earn that level of trust from someone like Paul Holes?
Well, Hull said it himself. He noted her dogged persistence and trustworthiness with sensitive information. She wasn't just looking for a sensational scoop. She approached the case files with the rigor of an archivist, an analyst.
So she proved she was in it for the resolution, not just for the story.
Exactly. She could synthesize all this disparate information without compromising the official investigation. That gave her this unusual level of access, this ability to work in parallel with them, not just report on them from the outside.
And that access allowed her to produce this incredible depth of material for Los Angeles Magazine. We really should go through the scope of those articles because it shows she was a full-blown researcher long before the book was even a reality.
The first big wave was in February and March of 2013. The foundational piece was called In the Footsteps of a Killer. That's where she formally introduced the GSK moniker and laid out the whole unified case.
But she didn't stop there. She immediately followed up with more material to help the public grasp the reality of the case.
Aye. She knew the power of multimedia, so she published Hear the Golden State Killer, which included the actual audio recordings of his voice. It's incredibly chilling.
She was also trying to cut through all the misinformation that had built up over the years.
Yes, with the 5 most popular myths about the Golden State Killer case. She was systematically dismantling the noise, and then she gave this inside look with the evidence locker, showing the tangible things he left behind. It made it all so real.
And her reporting was dynamic. It wasn't a one-and-done thing. She kept updating it.
Continuously. There was update, In the Footsteps of Killer, and then new evidence about a third recording of his voice. She treated the magazine's website like a living document of the investigation.
And she never lost sight of the human cost.
Never. In April 2013, she published Golden State Killer Update. One victim's family responds to our coverage. She deliberately prioritized the voices of the victims' families to ground the whole thing in real human consequence. That was central to her method.
And this is where we see her being so ahead of her time. In June of 2013, she published a Q&A.
Sleuthing with Science, a Q&A with forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick.
At that point, using forensic genetic genealogy to solve cold cases was, it was still a nascent idea. It wasn't widely used by police at all.
This is so important. It proves she was tracking the absolute cutting edge of the science. She was investigating the very methodology that would, 5 years later, lead to DeAngelo's arrest. It shows she was thinking like a strategic investigator, not just a writer looking back at old files.
She was always looking ahead. How could technology bridge the gap of time?
Always. And her work wasn't just about the GSK. She applied the same rigor to other major cases.
Like Charles Manson. She wrote pieces asking if he was responsible for more murders, exploring his enduring dark cultural legacy.
And she also focused on smaller, less-known cases, like the murder of a UCLA Medical Center nurse named Melanie Howell. It shows her motivation was justice for the forgotten, not just chasing famous monsters.
She also looked at the system itself.
Right, with articles like Dead Men Talking, about programs to get intel from incarcerated criminals before they died. She was always examining how the process of investigation could be improved.
All while continuing to publish updates on the GSK case through 2013 and 2014, exploring different theories, like whether he could have been a cowboy based on certain regional clues.
The sheer volume and specificity of her work in the magazine, it really built this permanent, comprehensive digital footprint of the killer's crimes. It was that foundation that led directly to the book.
And that book was I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Getting that deal with HarperCollins was the moment all this research was formalized into one single major publication.
It was the logical next step. She was so immersed in the subject, she used to talk about, living alongside the killer in her own mind. The title itself reflects that.
I'll Be Gone in the Dark. One woman's obsessive search for the Golden State Killer. It's about his methods, but it's also about how the search consumed her.
And the narrative around the book becomes this race against time, because the tragic reality is that in April 2016, she passed away.
With the manuscript only about 2/3 finished.
Which created this monumental challenge. How do you finish the work of such a personal, distinct writer, especially on a subject that requires absolute factual precision?
So tell us about the team that was brought in to complete it. It was an almost impossible task.
It was an expertly chosen team. The manuscript was completed by researcher Paul Haynes and her close collaborator, Billy Jensen. They had to sift through all her notes, her recordings, her fragmented chapters. Jensen, in particular, knew her methodology inside and out.
And her widower, Patton Oswalt, played a key role.
He wrote the afterword, which just frames her dedication so poignantly. And Gillian Flynn, the author, wrote the introduction, which gave the project this huge literary stamp of approval.
The fact that they assembled that kind of talent shows how highly regarded she was. They had to finish her story, the story of the search, without an ending to the actual case.
The book had to end not with an arrest, but with a tribute to the investigator herself.
And when it was finally released, posthumously, on February 27, 2018, the reception was just enormous.
It was an immediate phenomenon. #2 on the New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction, #1 for combined print and ebook. And it stayed on the list for 15 weeks. This was more than just a curiosity. It was a powerful piece of work.
It brought this massive, motivated new audience to a cold case that had stumped law enforcement for decades. The book itself became a catalyst.
A huge one. And the adaptation followed very quickly. On April 9, 2018, HBO announced they'd got the rights for a documentary series.
Also called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, directed by Liz Garbus. And filming began on a very, very specific date, April 24th, 2018.
A date that would become incredibly significant.
It really would. But before we get to that resolution, we need to add the personal context that was going on behind all of this intense, harrowing work.
Michelle McNamara met her future husband, the comedian Patton Oswalt, back in 2002 at one of his shows.
It's a charming story. She was in the audience, and he did a bit where he described Irish women as his kryptonite.
And as she was leaving, she just touched his arm and said, "Irish girls, nice." And that was it. His friend pushed him to go after her, and they started dating. They were married in 2005.
And their daughter, Alice, was born in April 2009. They built this very creative family life, but it was always under the shadow of her dark professional focus.
And that's a crucial point. Patton Oswalt was incredibly supportive of her work, but he spoke later about how difficult it was. How do you maintain a normal family life when your partner is constantly immersed in the details of murder and sexual violence?
Her work wasn't a job she could just leave at the office. It was an all-consuming search, often late into the night, pulling her into the darkness of those case files.
Absolutely. It takes an immense personal toll. But they did maintain this loving, creative environment. There's a really sweet detail about their daughter, Alice, making her voiceover debut at age 9.
On the show My Little Pony, friendship is magic.
Yes, she voiced a character named Windsprint, working alongside her dad and her stepmother, Meredith Salinger. It's just a little testament to the life and the light that she maintained while carrying the weight of that investigation.
But tragically, that balance couldn't hold forever. Her life was cut short on April 21st, 2016. She was only 46. She died in her sleep at their home in Los Angeles.
The context of her death is, it's sensitive, but it's directly related to the personal cost of her work.
Her death was ruled an accidental overdose. The autopsy cited the combined effects of multiple prescription drugs, Adderall, fentanyl, and Xanax. It also listed undiagnosed heart conditions as contributing factors.
And later, in June 2020, both Patton Oswalt and the documentary's director, Liz Garbus, publicly acknowledged that McNamara had been addicted to opioids.
It adds this layer of immense tragedy to her obsessive pursuit. The pressure to finish the book, the need for that intense focus, it came at a profound and ultimately fatal personal cost.
It's a painful reminder of the psychological toll that this kind of work can take on an investigator.
But the story of her life concludes with this almost unbelievable, stunning resolution. It happened almost exactly 2 years after her death and just weeks after her book was published.
On the evening of April 24, 2018, the exact day that filming for the HBO documentary began,
Just incredible timing.
authorities in California arrested Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, and identified him as the Golden State Killer.
And they caught him using forensic genetic genealogy, the exact method she had highlighted 5 years earlier.
The validation of her work was immediate and absolute. Patton Oswalt's statement afterwards pointed to one crucial detail. The authorities, in their press conferences, were using the nickname she coined, the Golden State Killer.
He called it proof of the impact of her work. It directly tied her writing, her public awareness campaign, to the resolution of one of California's worst cold cases.
Her work did something law enforcement couldn't do alone for decades. She synthesized all that scattered information into a singular, memorable public threat. It was this sustained, relentless campaign for justice.
A campaign that succeeded through meticulous documentation, strategic public awareness, and just this incredible personal drive.
Her legacy is one of empathy, obsession, and in the end, validation.
So if you look at the whole narrative, a childhood trauma and an adult assault shaping this investigative drive that redefines a massive criminal case, it really makes you think about the role of the citizen investigator in our time.
She didn't live to see the arrest, but her detailed work, the public awareness she built, and her focus on emerging technology, like forensic genealogy. All of those were critical parts of the final success. Which leads to an important question for you, the listener, to think about.
How many other cold cases are out there right now where a dedicated citizen investigator using the power of digital resources might just hold the key? The key that law enforcement, working in its traditional ways, might otherwise miss.
It's a question of where the lines of justice are truly drawn today. Is it just with the official investigation, or is it also with the power of sustained personal truth-seeking?
It's a powerful thought.
It truly is.
Thanks for listening.